Good morning, everyone. Happy Easter to you and your family. Bear with me one moment here. It's so good to be here this morning. My name is Bryan. I am the student minister here at Westside Church of Christ. And it is just a privilege to be able to share with you a little bit this morning and to work here to serve with our junior high and high school students. It is just so great to be able to see all of you. If you're a guest visiting with us this morning, I just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for choosing to be here on Easter Sunday with us. Westside is a church that is on a mission to share the good news of Jesus with the people here in Bakersfield, Greater Kern County. And one thing that I just really love about this church is that we don't just sort of do church on Sundays and then call it a week and head home. But all throughout the week, all throughout our lives, we're really striving to make a real impact in people's lives, to make a real difference. Just earlier this week, a group of our junior high and high school students went on a mission trip to Visalia and then all the way up to Oakhurst, California. And they gave up a few days out of their spring break to buy food for the homeless and to take it to them, to buy food or clothing for the homeless and take it to them. We spent about a day and a half working at a Bible camp that was just overrun with debris and brush and dead wood, and I know our teens had a really fun time, like chopping up all that wood and then just throwing it into a huge bonfire. So that was pretty cool. But they were really giving up their free time to go serve the homeless, to minister to the people who are really down and out. And so it's just a blessing to be at a church that takes our faith seriously. This is a church where we put our faith into action. So if you're visiting with us, we are so thrilled that you're here, and we hope you'll keep coming back as we serve together and grow together. Well, it is Easter, and Easter gives us a very special opportunity to celebrate the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that moment was really a pivotal moment in the way that God interacted with his people here on earth. The death, burial, and resurrection, it signaled a huge shift in the way that we interact with God, in the way that we're able to worship God. For the early Christians, the resurrection was the most important thing that we believe, the most important event in all of human history. And the resurrection story, the Easter story, is full of symbolism. And the story shows us and teaches us that there's hope and encouragement for our lives. So there's two things that I'd really like to focus on today as we think through the Easter story and the symbolism that it represents. The first is the dramatic transformation that is possible before and after an experience with Jesus Christ. And the second thing is how Jesus opens a door. He creates an open door to God where anyone and everyone can come have a relationship with him. So the first thing that the Easter story teaches us is that the best way to experience real change in our lives is through a powerful and personal experience with the risen Jesus Christ. Have you guys ever seen those, any kind of advertisement where they do a before and after picture? Maybe it's for weight loss pills or a home gym or a hair loss product where they really try and show you, okay, this is how terrible your life is now, but if you would only call or click and pay $19.95 plus shipping and processing, then your life could look like this instead. Have you guys seen those before? I am 100% convinced that the before and after pictures, that they did not get that way by using that product. 100% convinced it's just all made up. Sometimes I don't even think it's the same person. I think they get two different people and trying to make it seem like it's the same guy. Well, I want to show you an ad that was out there. This is an ad. This is a lady right here. Her name is, let me find it, Brooke Shadwell. And she lost 68 pounds. Isn't that great? Sorry that the picture's a little blurry, but that's just all I could find. So she lost 68 pounds. Wow, that's amazing. And would you believe that the secret was a special tea? You can just lose weight by drinking tea. And it's specifically Wu Yi tea. And this is what she said about it. It's amazing. Wu Yi tea is the only one I would have ever used. I'm extremely happy with the results. Looks like I'll be drinking tea now. Wow, isn't that cool? Wow, what an amazing transformation that she got just from drinking tea. Okay, the problem is she, Miss Brooke Shadwell, never once used that product. The Today Show did an investigation. And what the company found out, or what Today Show found out, this company just went online and found her pictures that she posted online, stole them, made up a fake quote, slapped it on there, and then printed this ad to make it seem like the tea is what helped her lose all this weight. You know what really helped her lose the weight? They found out, they interviewed her. She worked her tail off for an entire year. She ate right. It was hard work. It was dedication. That's how she was able to lose the weight. But we have these ads, and they seem just a little bit shady. Well, in the Bible, there's a before and after picture, and this time the results are 100% real. You can trust it. It's reliable. We have this great before and after picture of people just like us who experience a dramatic change in their priorities, in their attitude, in their outlook on life, and in their mission. It's the disciples of Jesus. So when you look at the disciples of Jesus before their resurrection, and you compare that to how they acted after the resurrection, it's night and day. So let's take a look at this real quick. We're talking about before the resurrection here, so the disciples of Jesus. After Jesus is arrested, the disciples kind of go into hiding. Fear takes over. They start to realize that their Messiah that they thought would help them conquer the Roman government, throw them out, and restore the land of Israel, they realized that wasn't going to happen. And the Roman Empire was still in charge. So they were very afraid for their lives. So this is what the disciples were doing and acting like after Jesus was arrested, but before the resurrection. They scattered in fear. They denied even knowing who Jesus was because of how afraid they were. They were mourning, they were weeping. They were so afraid that they met behind locked doors. And a lot of them returned to their former jobs. They had given up all hope of Jesus. They had decided in their own minds that Jesus was just another fraud who claimed to speak for God but really didn't. And so they just gave it all up and went back to the way things used to be. They were in shock. They were in disbelief. They were afraid. But then, not that long after, when you read the first few chapters of the book of Acts, instead of scattering in fear, the disciples openly preached Jesus, publicly baptizing 3,000 people all in one day right there in Jerusalem. Instead of denying knowing who Jesus even is, they were thrown in jail for preaching Jesus and threatened, and as soon as they got out, they kept preaching anyway. Instead of meeting behind locked doors, they met every day in the temple courts where everyone could see them, out in the open, out in public. And instead of returning to their old jobs like fishing, they decided to sell everything they have, giving up their livelihood to pursue God, to follow Jesus, and to serve in his kingdom. That's the before and after that the Bible shows us, the before and after. And so what could cause this kind of dramatic transformation? What could cause this total 180 in a person's life? It's not, pop psychology or advice from a TV personality. It's not self-help books. It's not a really inspirational quote that they do really cute on Pinterest. It is an experience with the risen Jesus. Only Jesus can help us experience that kind of change. So if you're looking to make a change in your life, if you're hungry to be part of something bigger, if you're feeling weighed down by your past or your mistakes and you're looking to experience real change, the only way, the best way to experience real change in our lives is through a personal experience with the risen Jesus Christ. When the disciples went to the tomb and it was empty, and they came face to face with Jesus, it was this light bulb moment. It was this light bulb moment where they started to realize that everything Jesus was saying about himself really was true. Jesus, on many occasions, predicted that he would be killed on a cross, and on the third day he would be raised back to life. And the disciples were kind of clueless about what that really meant, because so often Jesus spoke in parables, but this time he was speaking quite literally. And so when they experienced the risen Jesus, it was all the affirmation and validation that they needed to prove to them that Jesus Christ truly was the Son of God. He truly was who he claimed to be. The resurrection in their minds gave them all of the boldness they needed to go out into all the world, preaching about Jesus, baptizing people in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that Jesus commanded. For them, the experience with the risen Jesus was a moment where they knew their lives would never be the same. And the same thing is true for us today. Jesus can change our lives in ways that nothing and no one else can. You can try your hardest, you can work harder, you can get every self-help book there is out there, but you will never be able to experience change without a relationship with Jesus Christ. The power of God that was on display when God raised Jesus from the dead back to life. The scriptures teach us that same power that raised Jesus from the dead is at work in our lives too, enabling us to be more than we ever thought possible and to do more in his kingdom than we ever imagined. The same power that was at work raising Jesus from the dead is at work in your life. And so you might say, well, you don't know my sin. You don't know my story. You don't know what I've done. You don't know how far away from God I really am. You don't know the power of my God. And the experience of the risen Jesus Christ can help us do a complete 180 in our lives. So the disciples of Jesus are one great example of that. And the other is a man named Paul. The Apostle Paul is arguably the single greatest Christian missionary and church leader that has ever lived. He planted hundreds of churches all over the Mediterranean world, helped bring, hundreds of thousands of people to Christ all over the world. And late in his life, he even preached the gospel of Jesus Christ all the way into the heart of the Roman Empire, which was 100% opposed to Christianity at the time. But before he was this successful Christian missionary and church leader, Paul had a different name. His name was Saul. And Saul was 100% opposed to the church. You can maybe say it this way. He was 100% committed to seeing the church go away by any means necessary. He was part of plots to get Christians arrested, thrown in jail. He was there when Christians were killed. He did everything he could to stop the spread of Christianity because he viewed it as something that went against what God truly wanted. So he was very passionate about seeing the church stopped and destroyed. And he felt so much guilt about that later in his life that he wrote these words. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, and I am the worst of them all. He felt so weighed down by his sin and that guilt and that shame that he recognized there was no one else in the world who had messed up bigger than Paul. And so for Paul, the idea of a second chance, the idea of change is a theme that you can find all throughout what he writes in the New Testament. And so he writes these words in Romans chapter 6. For Paul, the experience of the resurrection, experiencing the risen Jesus face to face, enabled him to do a complete 180 in his life, to go from Saul, the enemy of the church, to Paul, one of the greatest missionaries there ever was. It was an experience of Jesus, powerful and personal experience of the risen Jesus that helped him experience this change. So for Paul, this idea of resurrection is a metaphor that he likes to use to show us the kind of transformation that's possible in our lives. So he writes these words in Romans 6, 3 through 4. Or have you forgotten that when we were joined with Christ in baptism, we joined him in his death? For we died and were buried with Christ by baptism. And just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glorious power of the Father, now we also may live new lives. And when you know Paul's entire story, the sin and the guilt and the shame from his former way of life, you can see why this idea of resurrection, of new life, of a second chance would be so important to him. And I think as we go out into Bakersfield in Kern County and share the good news of Jesus, we're going to find a lot of people who are hungry for a fresh start, who are weighed down by guilt and shame, who feel like they are defined by their mistakes, who are controlled by their past, who are looking for some kind of fresh start. And the good news of Jesus is that we have the hope of resurrection. And an experience of Jesus Christ can help us experience that kind of resurrection power. Here's one more a passage that Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 1, and I alluded to this. He says, I pray that you will understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe him. This is the same mighty power that raised Christ from the dead and seated him in the place of honor at God's right hand in the heavenly realms. It's saying the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is available to you if you are a believer in Jesus Christ. No matter what has gone on in your life up to this point, the power of God that raised Jesus from the dead is available to you to give you a fresh start. You can say goodbye to the old way of life and start a brand new life in Jesus today. That's the hope of Easter. That's the hope of the resurrection. So for us today, if you are feeling paralyzed by fear, weighed down by guilt, tormented by a past mistake, if you are looking to experience real, meaningful change in your marriage, in your priorities, in your outlook on life, don't look to Oprah. Don't look to Dr. Phil. Don't look to the self-help sections. Look to Jesus. Look to the empty tomb, which symbolizes the hope that we have that our lives don't have to stay the same today as they were yesterday. That we can have a fresh start in Jesus. The disciples went from fearful to fearless because of the experience they had with the risen Jesus. So the first thing that the resurrection teaches us is that the best way, the only way to experience real change is through a relationship with Jesus. And so later on in our service, if you're going to have an opportunity, if you're feeling like you're ready to take that step in your faith, to put on Christ in baptism, if you're ready to make Jesus the Lord of your life, we have an opportunity at the end of our service where the shepherds of our church, the spiritual guides, the spiritual leaders of this church will be all throughout this auditorium. And they are ready to talk with you, to pray with you, to find out your story, your journey that led you here. So if you're ready to make that step, we would just like to encourage you to come pray with one of our shepherds, one of our elders, and to take that first step in following Jesus. But I also know that for a lot of people, we still kind of have some reservations and fears about taking that leap of faith. And I've been in ministry. I've been a youth minister here at Westside for the past 3 years. And one of the things I really love about this church, one of the things that really motivated us to come serve here was sort of the family focus that's here at Westside. Was one reason I feel incredibly blessed is because we've got 2 kids. We've got Logan, who's 2.5, and a newborn little baby, Dylan, who's not even 2 months old yet. And one thing that I absolutely love about this church is the way that we have so many people in this church family that absolutely love and care for our kids. That we have people like fighting over who gets to hold Logan when I have to come up on stage. We've had people come over at midnight when it was time for us to go to the hospital, that just stopped everything to come to our house and to be with Logan while we went to the hospital. It's so amazing to me the love that this church family has for our kids, and we feel so incredibly blessed. We've got a great group of children's ministry teachers and volunteers who they care so much about our kids, about helping them grow up in faith and loving them and teaching them to follow Jesus. And I think it was last week we had a baby blessing up here. There was it felt like 40 people up on stage here, just families and babies, and just as a church having the opportunity to come together to bless them and to say, we are here for you. As you raise your kids, we are here for you too. And so that's one thing that I really love about being here at Westside. But I've been here almost 3 years, and I've been in ministry for almost 7 years. And one of the most common things that I hear from people when it comes to taking that leap of faith is this idea of, I just don't feel like I'm good enough for God. Or maybe more to the point, I feel like if I was truly vulnerable with my past or my background or my mistakes, that I would not be accepted by the Christians in the church. A lot of people feel like that their sin, their mistakes, their past automatically excludes them from being part of this kind of fellowship. That if we or if God truly knew what they were doing or what they had done, there is no way that God would want to be in a relationship with them. And it's this idea maybe that my sin is too big for God's grace. And even if they don't have the religious terminology or the Christian terminology to quite put it in that way, it's this idea that my past is too big of an obstacle for me to follow Jesus and to come to faith. So if you're working through those kinds of thoughts, if you're struggling kind of with that idea, then there's one more thing that we need to know about this resurrection story. There's one more thing that you need to hear today. It's that Jesus shows us that God's arms are open to everyone, regardless of our baggage and regardless of our background. And there's this moment in the story of Jesus' crucifixion that it's easy to gloss right over it. In the moment right after Jesus dies on the cross, Matthew 27:51 says this. And I promise you, this verse is about God's arms being wide open, but we'll explain it a little bit. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Bryan, wow, that verse just changed my life right now, just as you read that, because it is so obvious how that relates to my relationship with God. No, you're probably not thinking that because this is sort of an obscure reference to something that is actually extremely important and relevant and spiritually significant in your life. And I want to help explain that a little bit this morning. So I've talked to some of our teenagers about helping me with this part of the illustration. So if I've talked to you and you're going to come help me, come on up on stage and just stand kind of right in here, right in this section right here. So we're going to get some of our junior high school students to help me out with this. So in the Old Testament, before Jesus, the primary place where you worship God was the temple. Okay, the temple. And at first, all right, bring it in a little bit like this. Come on, let's get it centered. Okay, a little more, a little more. Good. You guys look great. So the primary place where they would worship God was the temple, and it started as a temporary structure that they could take with them as they wandered around and wandered through the wilderness and the desert. And then eventually King Solomon was the one who built the permanent temple in Jerusalem. And so in the temple, that's where the priests would offer sacrifices. It's where you would go to give your money to God. It was the most important building in all the land of Israel. Extremely significant for religious purposes, for cultural purposes, and everything like that. And just like a lot of maybe buildings, government buildings today, maybe religious buildings as well, the temple in Jerusalem got sort of more and more important and exclusive the farther you went in. Does that make sense? It got more holy the farther you went in. And so where you could go in the temple depended on who you were, on your status, where you were born. Are you male or female? All these things that, in all honesty, you had zero control over. But where you could go in the temple depended on your status. So we're going to kind of illustrate what some of the different statuses were here. I've got my little box of props here. Let's do some introductions here. This is Dylan Franklin, 7th grade, Norris Middle School.
Yeah.
Okay, Norris Middle School. And then we have Kel Harris, 7th grade, Freedom Middle School. Martha Prince, 8th grade, Actus Junior High. Vanessa Spears, senior, the Bakersfield High School. We've got Big Red, a.k.a. Justin Chase, senior, Stockdale High School. And Noel Villarreal Jr., although every time I say it, he says I say it wrong. That's how I'm going to say it anyway. And he just graduated. He's our first graduate of 2017. So, okay, so let's see here. All right, so let me pull this up real quick. Let me show a picture of the temple. There it is right there. Okay, so as you can see in the picture here, this is not an actual picture of the temple because it has been destroyed. All that's left is part of the wall. But this is a model of what it might have looked like. Okay, and so what you can see is that there's sort of outer courtyards, and then you can kind of go in a little bit more, and there's like another courtyard, and you can go in a little bit more, and then it's like the really exclusive courtyard, and then there's that big building at the back. You guys see that building at the back? Okay, so let's find out where everyone would have been. Let's see. Martha and Kel. I'm going to have you go stand way over there, okay, way over there. But first, you know what? We need props. We definitely need props. Okay, so the sort of like lowest status that would have been available, that's good, would be someone who's, I'm sorry about you. You know what? Here you go. You got nice hair. I don't want to mess up your hair. The lowest status that would have been available is someone who's not Jewish, who's not from that area. So you guys are going to be tourists, all right? So you're not Jewish. You're kind of, just go stand over there somewhere. That's basically how they treated people who, no, all the way down. You don't get to come up. All the way down on the ground, on the floor. Okay, good. Now, when I say foreigners, I want you guys to do like a little wave like this, okay? To them, though. To them, all right? So for the foreigners, very nice. They could come sort of look from a distance and stay in the very outer courtyards. But because they're not Jewish, they don't get to come anywhere near the important parts of the temple. They're not from around here, all right? And so we don't really like to let them in. Right, that sounds exclusive, and it kind of was. Do you guys know what it feels like to live as a foreigner in a foreign land, as a visitor in a foreign land? My wife and I grew up in Southern California, lived here our whole lives, went to Pepperdine University, and then the Lord took us to a foreign land, Texas. And so we lived there for 2 years, and I was like, this is weird. They got all kinds of customs I know nothing about. I really don't, what's a Whataburger? I don't know. I mean, so there's like things there. I did not really feel like I was there, but I wasn't like one of them. You guys understand what I'm saying? So there's people kind of like that. They would come to Jerusalem, they'd come to the land of Israel, but they're like not from around here, clearly. So they kind of have to stay over there. So that's them. Okay, now let's see. Vanessa, you're next. Vanessa. Okay, so this is good. So after foreigners, the next kind of level up would be a Jewish woman. All right, and so a lot of the Jewish women wouldn't really work like carpentry jobs or anything like that. They'd most likely be at home, like, what do you like to make? Cookies, brownies? Everything. Okay, so here's your prop. And so there's sort of a courtyard right there in the middle that would have been the court of women. So Vanessa, why don't you just kind of stand right about here? And when I say women, I want you to like mix it up like you're doing. Okay, so the foreigners are way out there. Don't forget the wave. Okay, and then like but as a Jewish woman, you could come up into like the next level up. All right. Now, you guys are going to be the guys in the story, obviously, right? Okay, so do you think that Kel and Martha should be allowed up in the temple? Probably not. Probably not. So this is the move right here. You guys know this move right here? Don't come up. All right, that's how we treat them. All right. So there's the really outer courtyards, and then there's the court of women. Mixing it up. Okay, good. All right, and then the next, let's see. Dylan, all right, my man Dylan. Okay, so after the court of women, there's the court of Israel. Okay, and so most of the men would have jobs. Here, put that on. I don't know how that works, but you put that on. You figure that out. A lot of the guys would have jobs like, I don't know, Jesus was a carpenter, so I kind of went the Home Depot thing. And so, oh no, but you get to come this way. All right, you get to come this way. So here's this too. I just want you to measure stuff, like all around the stage. Okay, just measure stuff. Yeah, you can measure yourself. So the next courtyard in would have been the court of Israel, where the Jewish men could have come. Now, Dylan, I'm very sorry, but you would have had to leave your wife behind, okay? As you come in closer towards the temple and the holy place over here, you're going to have to leave the women behind. So it's almost like the original man cave was kind of like that next level of the temple. That's where they could go there. So, all right, so we've got the foreigners way down on the bottom of the stairs. The Jewish women could come up. All right, let's scoot down a little bit here. Let's Noel and Big Red, come down here a little bit. And then Dylan, we'll kind of right there. All right, Dylan, I want you to stand like right here. I want you to stand right here, all right? Right here. Yeah, right there. Okay, good. And there would have been like a door here with a wall, all right? So there's separation here. And that's kind of one of the big ideas here, is that all throughout the temple there's separation. They're way out on the outskirts, and then Vanessa can come into the court of women, which has its own walls, and then you go through like an exclusive area to now it's where all the guys are, okay? It is exclusive. It's very exclusive. You have to be a male, a Jewish male, all right? All right, so that's you. All right, so you're measuring stuff. You work. It's like the Jewish man cave, so that's cool. And then where you were, this is really cool. Where you were, there was an altar that the priest would be serving at, and the altar was outside. One of the altars was outside. So Noel, you're going to be the priest, okay? Now, you're not the best priest. You're just a regular priest. So I brought you a tiny Bible. It's a tiny Bible. Okay. All right. Now, there would have been an altar maybe right around here that Dylan could have seen from the court of Israel, the court of men, but you weren't allowed to come to the altar because you're not a priest. You're just a regular Jewish guy with a job, okay? Does that make sense? So, priest, I want you to stand right here, and when I say priest, I want you to hold up your embarrassingly small Bible, okay? Hold that up. So the priest would have been here in the sight of the court of Israel doing the religious ceremonies and everything that a priest is supposed to do. But, Noel, as the priest, you are not the head honcho. You know who the head honcho is? You know who the top dog is? Big Red. Justin Chase right here. Okay, so oh, that was loud. Imagine, I forgot your guys' sunglasses, but that's okay. All right, so Noel here is, he's a priest at the outside altar. And then there would have been, do you guys see that tall building at the back of the temple? This is kind of where we are now. So Noel is right on the outside of that door, out in the open, where Dylan in the court of Israel can see him performing. And there also would have been altars inside the room. So you might have been outside, you might have been inside, but you're not the head honcho. Big Red is the head honcho, the high priest, okay? In order to be a regular priest in the land of Israel, you had to be Jewish, you had to be male, and you had to be born to the tribe of Levi. Your family, you had to come from the right family. If you weren't born in the right family, you want to be a priest? Sorry, you can't do it. It's a requirement. Now, not everyone from that family is automatically a priest, but if you wanted to, you had to be born into that family. So if you weren't, sorry, you are automatically excluded. You will never be able to perform the religious ceremonies on the altar in the temple just because of the kind of family that you come from. That's part of the system that we're talking about here. And then, so that's on the outside. And then we have the temple proper, the actual tall building in the back. As you go into that room, there's a very, very special area all the way in the back. All right, so picture this. As we come farther and farther into the temple, it gets more religious, more holy, more important, and all the way at the back was a room called the Most Holy Place. And inside of that, there would not have been Dodger sunglasses, but there would have been religious artifacts, religious things in there that symbolize God's very presence with his people. It would have been things like the Ark of the Covenant. And so they viewed this small room at the back of the temple as the very place where God's presence resided with his people here on earth. If you wanted to be with God, to experience intimacy with God, it would have been at this small room called the Most Holy Place at the very back of the temple. And so, Justin Chase, you are the head honcho, the top dog, the man in charge. You are the high priest over all of Israel. You are a Jewish man. You come from the tribe of Levi. You meet all the qualifications to be a priest. You are the most religious person in the whole country. You're the best of the best, the top 1%, etc., etc. Do you get my point? Okay, you're the guy. You're the man, okay? The most important person in all of Israel. Guess how often you get to come hang out in the most holy place? Anytime you want to?
Once a year.
Once a year? You're so smart. Wow, who's our youth minister?
You.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So once a year you get to come in and experience true intimacy with God in the most holy place. Do you think Noel does as a priest? Can Dylan come in and take a selfie with the Ark of the Covenant? Hashtag YOLO. No, you can't do that. You would die. All right, that was the punishment. If you come into a place that you are not allowed to, the punishment was death. They took this very seriously. All right, do not come into the most holy place. You get to come in here once a year. So even the most religious person in the entire country could only experience that intimacy, that connection with God once a year. What does that say about the rest of us? We have no hope. You guys have no hope down there. We got the foreigners down there. Give them a little wave. We got the Jewish woman and the court of women, the court of Israel. You get to see some of the religious stuff, but get nowhere near it. We got the priest. Oh, Justin, you're a huge Bible, man. I forgot. Here you go. All right, so there's your big Bible, okay? So yours is definitely bigger because you're the high priest, the most important. Okay, so you guys can kind of see what this system is trying to illustrate, right? You guys see where we're going with this here? All right, so when we go back to, so here's who we have. Okay, foreigners. Okay, we kind of did that whole deal. So let's take it back to the curtain. All right. So this room right here was so holy. It was so special. It was so important that not anyone could just come in. And so they wanted to separate it. They wanted to separate it from the rest of the temple area. And so they put this huge curtain that you can read about in the book of Leviticus. And they would put a curtain here so that no one from the outside would even get a glimpse of this holy of holy rooms. The curtain at the back of the temple blocked off an unholy people from a holy God. It blocked off a sinful people from a perfect God. And it was meant to show just how good God is compared to just how bad we are as humans. And so when you look at things from a human point of view, when you look at our own goodness, how religious we are, how many good deeds that we've done, no one in this entire room, this entire temple area, would be able to approach the Holy of Holies just on their own. Based on their own merits, on their own goodness, you never would have been able to do that. Because as people, we are not good enough to come into God's presence. But when we read Matthew 27:51, this is the moment right after Jesus dies on the cross. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. This holy of holy rooms that only the most religious person could ever dream to enter. Because of Jesus' death, the curtain covering that, separating that holy room from the rest of us is torn in two. And so now suddenly, come on up, everyone come up, everyone. So now the curtain is wide open and everyone can come in. Noel, bring it in, man, bring it in. Here we go. So this would have been unheard of for all of these people to come into the presence of God here in the Holy of Holies. But because of Jesus' death on the cross, We no longer have to evaluate people based on where they come from or what gender they are, what kind of family they have, whether they're religious or not. We no longer have to evaluate people based off of how religious they are or aren't. But because of Jesus, anyone and everyone can come into the presence of God. Let's give all of our high school and junior high students a big round of applause. I'm going to need my props back, but you could just leave them right here. That's perfect. Thank you. So it's this incredible moment. Let me pick this up real quick. It's this incredible moment. Because Jesus dies on the cross, everyone can come into God's presence. Let me catch up on my notes here. So this system, there's a lot of symbolism here that we've talked about. The system that, thank you. The system of you can only go so far based on who your family is or what kind of background you have or how religious you are or do you come from the right tribe. That whole system is designed to teach us that we are really insufficient, that we are not good enough on our own. But because of what Jesus accomplished on the cross, everyone can come into that kind of intimacy with God. The curtain in the temple represented a clear and obvious reminder that you are not good enough, that I am not good enough to approach God. When I approach God, I have so much sin and junk and guilt and shame in my life. I'm not worthy to come into his presence. That's what the curtain represented. But because of what Jesus did on the cross, the curtain is torn. And the good news of the gospel is that we don't have to face God on our own anymore. Jesus goes with us into the Holy of Holies, into that most holy place. As we approach our Heavenly Father, we don't approach him alone, defined by our own sin. We approach our Heavenly Father with Jesus at our side, defined by the blood that he shed on the cross. And we see ourselves as imperfect and messed up, and God sees us covered in the perfect blood of Jesus Christ. Here's what it says in Hebrews chapter 10, talking about this Holy of Holies and the curtain and what Jesus accomplished. And so, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By his death, Jesus opened up a new and life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. And since we have a great high priest who rules over God's house, let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting him. For our guilty consciences have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and our bodies have been washed with pure water. When Jesus died on the cross, it signaled an end to the merit-based system where your relationship with God is defined by all the external things. So if you are feeling like, I'm interested in Jesus, but I just don't think I'm the kind of person who can be a Christian. I'm interested in knowing more about God, but I just don't think I would be accepted here at church. The good news for you and the good news for all of us is that we are no longer defined by our past and our sin and our shame. But all of us can go boldly, confidently, right into the presence of God because we have Jesus in our hearts. Because of what Jesus accomplished on the cross, all of us, regardless of your baggage or your background, all of us can experience the same kind of intimacy with God that used to be reserved for only the best of the best. But now all of us can go right into that Holy of Holies, no matter where we come from, what kind of family we have, whether you grew up in a religious home or not. That promise of dramatic change in your life, that promise of a fresh start is open to everyone. And so Christians, we need to stop this. We need to stop this attitude of, you don't come from the right family. Your sin doesn't belong here. You're not allowed to be here. We need to stop the finger wagging. Jesus has torn that curtain in two. Now everyone can come into the presence of God. And so we need to stop judging people's stories and experience. And we need to be so welcoming anytime someone expresses a desire to know more about Jesus Christ. If you're looking to take that next step in your faith, all you need to do to take that next step is to make Jesus the Lord of your life. We're going to have an opportunity right now where our elders are going to come up. We're going to sing a song of invitation. If you are interested in taking that next step in your faith, of taking that leap of faith to follow Jesus, we want to encourage you to come pray with us, to share your story with us. Let us know how we can help you, how we can pray with you. The Easter story teaches us two important truths. That the before and after picture because of the resurrection, we can have a dramatic transformation in our lives through a relationship with Jesus. And that because of what Jesus accomplished on the cross, true intimacy with God is now open to anyone and everyone, regardless of our baggage, regardless of our background. Please come pray with us as we stand and sing.